Hello and welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino Verrelli, founder and CEO of Project Purple, and we've got an exciting interview coming up with a very special guest after a few quick updates. Since 2010, we've contributed over $3 million and counting to pancreatic cancer research efforts. We've also allocated over $1 million worth of aid to more than 1,500 patients and families through our patient aid programs. Your monthly or one-time gift can improve patients' lives through research and assistance programs. You can donate now at projectpurple.org. Pancreatic cancer does not rest, and neither will we. Your support is truly appreciated. If you're looking to get involved in one of our events, whether that means joining a run team, participating in a virtual run walk, group fitness, golf, or anything else you can think of, visit projectpurple.org/events to learn more. Coming to us all the way. I say that like everything's all the way, but it looks sunny there. Pancreatic cancer survivor and also a college student at Notre Dame. I went to a high school named Notre Dame, so I have a lot of love for Notre Dame University in South Bend, Indiana. Toni Bravo. Welcome to the Project Purple podcast, Toni.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I knew we were playing catch up a little bit before we hit record here. So your story is really unique. Full disclosure, we got a Google hit. I got a Google hit on your story in People Magazine, and I was like, oh, we'd love to have Toni on the podcast. So I know scheduling and everything. So I'm super excited to hear your story firsthand. I did read a bit of your article in People Magazine, but I always love, as I said before, like, this is like us meeting in a cafe, meeting for the first time and having this connection to pancreatic cancer. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you. As I always say here in the podcast, you can stay as high level as you want, or you can get in the weeds. And with that, the microphone is yours.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me again the opportunity to share my story. I was really excited when I got your guys' message on Instagram, just because obviously it's very specific to pancreatic cancer specifically. So that was a great message for me to receive. But yeah, regarding my story, finding out like my diagnosis and everything, I could say my story is like pretty, I would describe it as more like a roller coaster. Cause like the way it all started out. So I got diagnosed my junior year of college. But prior to that, in the fall of my junior year, it was just like basically everything was normal. Obviously, I was living like a pretty normal life as just a busy student at Notre Dame, enjoying fall semester, football season, and everything. But in October, so I had like kind of like two events that kind of happened at the same time with my diagnosis. So in October, before December, which is when I got diagnosed, I'd actually gotten ran over by a car crossing the street on my way to school. So, and which is like crazy to say. And I kind of like, I've given myself the title of like the cat with 9 lives ever since like these like little like these events happening. But yeah, so in October I got hit by a car, unfortunately. But I was on a scooter, so that kind of like saved me from like any like real damage. But the way this correlates to my story is that during that time when I got hit by the car and I was taken to the hospital, they did actually a CT scan of my abdomen where the tumor was. But in October it had gone undetected, which was like really crazy. And then of course, like as I talked about in like my People Magazine article as well, following the car accident, I started having like anxiety and everything like that. And one day, like I just had like a really bad anxiety attack. My mom just encouraged me to like go to the hospital. And when I did, they did another CT scan of my abdomen, and then they caught it the second time at the same hospital. I'm assuming different radiologists who read it. If one caught it and one didn't. So that was like definitely like my really big, like, I would call it almost like a Holy Spirit moment kind of, only because it was like my body was giving myself a second chance of like finding it and getting that early, like the early attack on my diagnosis. So like I feel like I don't really talk about that part as much, but I feel like that's always like something that's really interesting to my story, only because it could have been detected at a different time, but then it wasn't. And then just like my body speaking to me and like my anxiety, like telling me that like something's wrong. Um, it got caught that second time, which was really like a miracle for me.
So hindsight's always 2020, and I'll use a lot of terms, and one of them is loaded. This is not a loaded question, but did you ever have anyone look at that first scan and the second scan, like separate from the radiologist that looked at it and said, "Oh yeah, it originally was on that, but the first scan just wasn't like blatantly obvious, but
Yeah.
clearly with the second one you could tell." So was
Mhm.
that kind of the case, or was it like that there was nothing on that first scan, but then the second one
So
blatantly is?
So it was on both scans. I just don't know. I don't know how it came about them not seeing it the first time and then seeing it the
Uh,
second. Because the type of tumor that I had on my pancreas, I've had it for quite a while. The doctors at City of Hope said that I potentially may have had it since I was 10. Like it's been slowly growing since then.
yeah,
So I've had it for a while. It's not like a new tumor that quickly growed and then they caught it. It's something that I've had that's gradually grew. So it was we did look at the two scans. It was on both scans. It's just like like one person caught it and one person didn't.
yeah,
Kind of.
and the purpose of this
Yeah.
this question wasn't to beat, like, we're not passing judgment on anyone, trying to beat anyone up, or even on yourself, but it's just fascinating. Like, I think that's like something that's like another thing that we'll say, like, we live in a great country. We have great access to healthcare if you have access to that, but that still doesn't mean that mistakes or like things like this don't happen, I guess, right? Like, and there's the other piece of this, like with imaging, and I know from talking to a lot of people, radiologists and doctors, like sometimes, like, yeah, the image shows that it's isolated. There's one cancer, there's one tumor, and then they go in and, it's metastatic disease, and the imaging just doesn't pick it up, right? So the imaging is only as good as it is, depending on if it picks up everything, right? And so that's
Yeah.
why, like, it's really frustrating, I guess, is the point, right? Like, is that
Yeah.
that we don't have with this disease like a definitive test or a definitive answer 90% of the time.
Yeah. And it's also one of the other, like, as you're saying, like frustrating parts about like pancreatic cancer in general. I feel like it also depends on where you are. Like I know like for me specifically, like being in Indiana, like I don't want to say anything about Indiana, like the way like the doctors and everything, but like me personally, the doctor that saw me that day, um, came into the room and admitted blatantly, like very like being very transparent with me that he didn't know anything about the tumor that I had. And so like was being like which I appreciate a lot for him being transparent about that, because then he like obviously like recommended like no, like you should definitely take care of this at home where there's going to be more doctors that are able to treat you specifically for this. But he was very transparent that he didn't know anything or a lot about the type of tumor that I had and about like this type of cancer. So, I mean, it sucks that that's the way that it is, but I think it definitely still like also depends on like just like where you're living geographically too, of like your chances of like getting it caught and getting it treated correctly, because it's not as known.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like this is a big challenge, right? And I think that's the one thing that we always kind of stress, is these high volume centers. And so clearly City of Hope, over the last couple of years, they've really there's been investments made there, philanthropy, also from, just people being there and, building, a program where it is one of the top, or, is a place of excellence for this disease. Which is fascinating because you would think, and this is something with pancreatic cancer, that there's just not enough being done with it, right? And this is part of an advocacy frustration, is like for someone in Indiana, to your point, like it's kudos to the doctor to say that, because sometimes doctors don't like being humble and thinking they can solve every problem. But, knowing like strengths and weaknesses and being able to say like, hey, you should go to, a specialist, and, oh, you're from LA, like go back to City of Hope, or go to City of Hope and talk to those guys, because they really know this disease better than us.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely appreciated it a lot, but it also, yeah, like how you're saying, like it just made me think about like yes, I'm lucky enough to be from California and have the opportunity to go back home and get it done. But I feel like if I just thought about too, like if I was a person like who lives like here, like in South Bend, and heard that, and like what if I didn't have the money to go to Los Angeles to go get the treatment? Like it's very definitely like disheartening to like hear that and know that like a lot of people who are living here like possibly wouldn't have like the opportunity or the means to go get like their diagnosis treated.
Yeah, we've got to get a lot better.
Yeah.
So you go through this, and then now you go to LA, back where you're from, and you meet with the team at City of Hope. And so what happens from there?
Yeah. So I went back home for winter break, so around Christmas time. And I just got like obviously like it was my first time at City of Hope. I was a new patient, so just getting like all of the regular like entry MRI, CT scans just so that they could have their own records of it. And then once they looked at the scans, they confirmed the diagnosis that the doctors in Indiana here had given me. It was a solid pseudopapillary neoplasm tumor on my pancreas, which is just like a rare tumor. It's non-metastatic. It doesn't like spread. So that was something that was like really relieving for me personally when she told me that. And as I said before, like it was she helped me in telling me that, it's treated through surgery. And like obviously no one wants to go through surgery, but like when it's this type of diagnosis, it's a lot more reassuring when someone tells you it's done by surgery and not through something like chemo or radiation, just because chemo is like obviously very hard on the body. So I feel like even though surgery is a big word too, I was so grateful and would rather hear that word than the other one.
Yeah.
So, so her just telling me that, and also giving me a lot of flexibility with the surgery when she was telling me about my tumor. She told me, like it is a big surgery and there's going to be a lot of recovery time. So you can really choose when you want to do this. It's a slow growing tumor that doesn't spread. So we can wait till you graduate. She did give me the option of waiting till I graduated and then doing the surgery. But me personally, I felt like just like having the knowledge that it was inside of my body, even though it had been for a long time by now, I was kind of just like, no, I want to get it out. So like as soon as possible. So that is why we scheduled the surgery for the summer, for this past summer that just passed. But yeah, that was like my whole like as far as like making that decision to get the surgery in the summer was just because I didn't want it inside of me anymore. It was kind of like just the knowing of it freaked me out a little bit. But yeah, and then in June, when I came back and finished out my junior year, I had a month of just like enjoying my summer. Like I hung out with friends, went to the beach, went to Disneyland, just did like the normal like California things, just like the things that I knew wasn't going to be as easy to do after surgery because I was going to have to be pretty much bedridden for a lot of the time for the rest of the summer. Um, so I did that. And then in June, I got the surgery done. I got the robotic Whipple.
Yeah.
And my surgery went really well. It ended up being longer. I know my parents were a little stressed out that day, only because I think the surgery was supposed to be about 5 hours and mine ended up being 8. So it was really long because the tumor was bigger than they expected it to be during surgery, which like that happens a lot. You can't really tell the size of it until you're like really looking at it. So it did take a little bit longer. And yeah, I mean, everything really like that day of was kind of a big blur only because my surgery time was pretty early in the morning. Um, and I feel like something that I talked about in my People magazine, but is also I feel like really important to the story of like my whole surgery was I feel like the biggest night for me going up to the surgery was the night before. Um, And just like because there was a lot of emotions, just like I mean, like I feel like I didn't really talk about it with my family a lot, only because I feel like I knew they were trying to be strong for me and trying to like reassure me that everything's okay. So I didn't want to worry them with like my own feelings. So I feel like the night before surgery, when I was just like in my room alone, like it was a very like high stress, like emotional moment for me. And like I've really like I've always been like a really religious person. I grew up going to all Catholic school. I went to an all girls Catholic high school, went to a Catholic middle school. It's like the whole like upbringing. So I've always been like very much like into my faith. And like the night before, like I just prayed a lot. Um, just like obviously I knew I was in the best hands at City of Hope, but like anything can happen kind of thing. We never know what's gonna happen. So I just prayed and I told God, which I told him in my prayer that I was like completely, it was like a weird at peace feeling that I had the night before surgery of like, I'm completely at peace with what will happen either way. Like I felt like I told him that like, if I make it through surgery, then obviously this was meant to be and I'm meant for something big in my life for me to like really like do something with this, which is why I'm doing this podcast today. Um, because like I feel like the reason why I made it through was to like tell my story and like advocate for these things and like be a voice for like the younger people who are getting diagnosed. But I was also at peace with if something did go wrong during surgery and I didn't make it through. Because I just felt like there was no point on fighting it. I don't know. I was really at peace with either way for either outcome, which was really weird for me because I'm a really big person who like is afraid of the topic of death. So
All right, I got to jump in here. So,
yeah.
how old were you when this junior year? 20, how old
Yeah.
are you?
I was when I got the surgery done, I was 21.
All right, so you're 20 when you get diagnosed and then turn 21 when you get the surgery, right? I think from what I recall.
Yeah. 20 when I got diagnosed, then 21 surgery.
And this is a loaded question.
Yeah.
There's
Go
no
for
right
it.
or wrong to it, but so where do you think, I know you say faith, but like 20 years old, you're
Yeah.
facing the barrel of a gun, right? Like going into this. Like, so is that like, can you look back at like an experience like maybe that you had in life or maybe like parent, like role model or something that like just kind of helped you get in that space, like to think that way? Because most 21-year-olds are thinking like,
Yeah.
where am I going on spring break? Like, how's my
Yeah.
senior year? Like, how many parties are we gonna have? Or, more of the social stuff where like this is like serious stuff at a very young age to go through.
Mhm. Yeah. I feel like especially like my parents, they've always like encouraged me to like live like the mantra of like the mantra that frustrates a lot of people, like everything happens for a reason, which is like a really frustrating mantra of like to like live by, only because it's like, well, why is it happening though? You always like question the question why. So I've always looked at everything as like a redirection of my life, or like I've always had like a pretty optimistic outlook on life, and that like anything that happens that kind of changes the course of something is because like that's what's meant to be, that's what is meant to happen. Because like I mean, like even when I look at like all of the different, like I moved around a lot when I was little, so like I've been to like a lot of different schools. Like Notre Dame is like my, I think, 11th or 12th school that I've been to. So I was a new girl a lot. I moved around a lot, which gave me a lot of like adaptability. I learned to adapt really quickly. I learned to like always put myself out there and always cherish the time that I had at a certain school or a certain place, and really quickly like develop friendships like that, and always um, just like enjoy it for what it is. I feel like is what like put me in that mindset, because I've never really like worried about like, obviously I've worried about like when I was in high school, worrying about what college I'm going to go to, and like now being in college, what law school am I going to go to? But
Yeah.
like I've been really big, and something that I'm grateful that my parents put on me, and also through like mentors of like my old volleyball coaches. I played volleyball like my entire life, and my coaches were also really big on this of just like only focusing on the things that I can control. um, and I feel like that was like that little mantra there too, like only focusing on the thing I can control, which came from my volleyball coach. That really, him drilling that into my brain was also played a big role in like me going through this entire situation, because like at the end of the day during surgery, I'm not in control of anything. I'm basically at the hands of like the people that I'm trusting and the doctors that are doing the surgery for me, and doing this to help me to make my life better afterwards. But there's not a lot of control in that. And I think that having those mentors in my life and my parents who really pushed that mindset on me, was what helped me you know, not lead myself into a kind of down spiral after the diagnosis. And I did have nights where it was like emotional, and like I would cry, and like it was like it was a lot to deal with. Um, but I feel like I've always pretty much had a really optimistic outlook on life. I feel like I don't know. I also feel like I find lessons out of everything. So like even when bad things do happen, I'm always like, well, I got this out of it, or I got this out of it. So it's like I feel like that's always been like a big thing for me. And that's probably why, as like a 21-year-old, like even though that's weird to be like, oh, I'm fine with like if things don't go right during surgery, like I'm at peace with that. Even though it's a really weird thing to like be at peace with at such a young age. I think it's because of the way that my coaches and my parents really, the mindset that they pushed on me.
Powerful stuff. Um, I want to rewind a little bit. So when you get this diagnosis
Yeah.
originally, did you have like one of these like oh crap moments? I mean, knowing like pancreatic cancer, like did you know anything about pancreatic cancer before? Did you like go to Google, or like what was that like when you originally got that diagnosis?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Thanks. Yeah, I do need, thanks for the guiding questions also though, because I do get like kind of like my mind goes everywhere when talking about this. Um, but yeah, so when I initially got the diagnosis, I was alone. Um, so when he first said it, when the doctor like very first like the words came out of his mouth,
In Indiana. This is in Indiana, right?
this is in Indiana. It was at St. Joseph's Hospital here in South Bend. And he came in kind of like, I think every doctor has their kind of like bedside manner. So like I was pretty good at like reading the body language of it, like when he first entered the room, of like I don't think he's about to say something good. So it was kind of already like the gut feeling that I was about to hear something that I probably didn't want to hear. And then once he sat down, um, he was transparent, as I said, like very first, before he even said the diagnosis, he said, just want to let you know right now, I don't know a lot about this, about the diagnosis that I'm about to give you. So I knew it was something that it had to be like somewhat rare for someone like me. So he was like, I don't really know a lot about the diagnosis, but you have a tumor on your pancreas. And from what I've read, it's a form of cancer. That's how he presented it to me. So, of course, like when you hear the cancer word, even if you don't really know a lot about it, or if you don't know
Yeah.
specifically about pancreatic cancer, like just like the word itself is like very like you're saying, like it's a loaded word. So
Yeah.
so just like hearing it, I in the moment, because I was alone, I think I kind of just like internalized it, and just like I didn't really have a reaction. But then it's like the timing of it all was actually very good, because as soon as he said that, like literally like 5 seconds after he said the word cancer, my boyfriend, who I started dating in high school, so we've been dating for about 5 years now, so a long time. But he walked into the room as soon as he said that, and once I saw him walk into the room, I felt like I could let myself go, and I kind of that's when I started like emotionally reacted, and I started having just like a moment of like tears, just because the entire time that I was alone waiting for the diagnosis, it was about like like it takes 45 minutes each time you get a CT scan to get the results. So like it was about like a good 3 hours of me just being in like the hospital alone, where I felt like I needed to be strong for myself. So like just having him like come into the room after the diagnosis, it allowed me to like emotionally react to what I had just heard. And that's when I've kind of like allowed myself to like have feelings and like feel just like the distress of the moment of like oh crap, like this is like serious. And like, um, obviously because there was like a lot of unknowns during that moment, because I hadn't gone to City of Hope yet, it was more of a fear response of like
Yeah.
what's going to happen to me kind of thing.
So crazy. So is there a point then when you get to City of Hope or when you have that initial discussion where I would imagine it's almost like, like your worst fear, and then
Yeah,
you're just okay, so now you're go back to school, like, hey, okay, Tony, go back to school. And then like you said, like you had to wait, like this happened in the fall. So like again, like just trying to like conceptualize here. Football's going on. Last year was a good football season. This
yeah,
year was better. Well, they didn't have the outcome that they should have had this year, but
yeah,
they still made it to the championship game. So you're in the mix of still being a college student,
yeah,
engaging in all that, and then but in the back of your mind or on your shoulder, you've got
yeah,
this thing called pancreatic cancer now that this
yeah,
doctor in Indiana mentioned to you. But you got to get to City of Hope, so
yeah,
what happens in the winter? So I would imagine during that time frame, it must have been like pins and needles and on
yeah,
edge.
yeah.
Family,
So
did your mom and dad know? Like, I'm sure you shared with your parents like right away. What? So they must have been like, I have two kids in college, so I would imagine like if I got that call, I'd be like, oh crap, like
yeah, so that day of the diagnosis, I called. I called my mom, and my mom and dad were actually together when I called her, so it was perfect. Just like of them like being in the same room. Um, she was very much like, I think my mom didn't really want to show emotion to me, only because she didn't want me to freak out. So like it's kind of,
yeah, yeah,
so she was very much like the strong one. My dad kind of just stayed off the camera because my dad is very much of a as he's grown with age, become more like like very much more like in tune with his emotions. So like
yeah.
he was very much like more like he had an emotional reaction. So I think he very much tried to like stay out of the conversation just so it wouldn't affect me. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think about that too. Of like, I can't imagine like in the future, like God willing, I do have kids, of like hearing like my kid calls me like one random day, like right before they're about to come home for Christmas, and then they tell me like, oh, I just got diagnosed this from the doctor. Like it must have been like a surreal moment that I can't imagine how they felt. But yeah, my mom was definitely like, I appreciated her strength in the moment, um, just because it made me not feel like it's the end of the world. Like as much as the diagnosis could feel like that, and because you're just scared of like what the future holds and like what the process looks like of treating it. But she very much did her best at like making me not overthink the situation more than I already was.
So wild. So fast forward now, you go in for the Whipple, which we know. I mean, so there's two ways: the robotic one, and then there's the traditional. Was the traditional like standard even an option, or were they just like, hey, we think we could do this robotically, which is better because the
Yeah.
recovery time, there's less of an incision. The traditional Whipples from sternum down past your belly button. So was there, first question, was there an option, or they were just like, hey, we're gonna do robotic here?
Okay, so yeah. So there wasn't really a conversation of like between the two. It was kind of just like, hey, we're gonna do robotic here. Which was nice. I would have, I think I would have personally chosen, being so young too, I would have chosen the robotic either way. Just because as you talk about the incision, like it's very much like
Yeah.
different, completely like opposite sides of the spectrum of like what the incisions look like. I mean I do still have like, instead of like one big one, I have like 8 tiny ones like on the
Yeah.
top of my stomach. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not just about like also like cosmetics. It's about saving your life too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But like
But
that,
the robotics, so like we've had this debate, not a debate, but we've had this discussion a lot, right? And I think like, technology, here we are in 2025, right? And you've got AI that does all this. I mean, you can go to school now and just use AI. We know kids do that.
yeah,
Um, so like, you can get a college degree, I guess I'm saying, without like actually going, like using AI. But so like technology has advanced, right? And that's the one thing that's really wild in this space from a surgical standpoint, that the surgeries have gotten better. And a big part of that is the robotic piece where, and there are, and we're not here to debate that or have that discussion, but I do
Yeah.
know, like if you have the robotic Whipple, they're as effective as the traditional, just slice, with a human scalpel, but also, the recovery is like
Yeah.
key. And that's the piece that I think I've seen data, and there's plenty of data on this, that like, if someone has to get chemotherapy, that
Mm,
the recovery time, we're talking like 2 to 3 weeks compared to 6 to 8 weeks. Like that's a
yeah.
big difference, in terms of treatment for people who have to do chemotherapy. So there are a lot of benefits of doing the robotic Whipples versus the traditional, where you have like an incision from the sternum down past the belly button. So I don't think it's like anything like not common. I just think it's a matter of like practice and expertise. And
Yeah.
clearly, as we said in the very beginning, like City of Hope's like a high volume center, one of the top centers in the country. So I'm sure they knew what they were doing. Question in terms of, because you mentioned something early on that I just want to kind of clarify. So you have this was a really rare tumor.
Mhm.
So when you were given that, did everything kind of change in terms of mindset and like family? Because I would imagine when you're in Indiana and they're saying pancreatic cancer, I mean, did you go to Google and like whatever you Google is what you Google? It's not like the phenotype of the tumor was known at that point in time.
Yeah, so I looked up immediately the type of tumor that he told me it was, like
Oh,
while
so he did.
so he told me it's a rare tumor on my pancreas, but on the CT scan summary, it said like, oh, it's this type of tumor. It's a pseudopapillary tumor. So it didn't. So yeah, so that was pretty like enlightening too. So I automatically looked it up. Um, but of course, like when you're looking it up, you kind of go down into the rabbit hole of like normal like pancreatic cancer tumors and like everything like that relating to it. And then you realize like how big of a effect pancreatic cancer is on people who get the diagnosis. So I know they always tell you to don't Google it, but
Yeah,
it
never Google. Google's not
yeah.
your friend.
So it definitely did scare me just because I didn't know specifically really like what I actually had because it hadn't been confirmed yet.
Yeah.
By City of Hope. So like there was a lot of questions of like, well, what if it is this type of tumor that Google's saying, or it's this one, or it's this one. So like um it was definitely just like a lot of like I think I caused myself more stress probably than I should have, or that I could have prevented that by not looking it up on Google. But yeah, obviously that was like my first instinct of like, well, if he can't tell me, then I'm just gonna look it up and see if I can find some information on it. But yeah, so that was my first response. Just looking it up and trying to find out as much about it as I could, just because like obviously I was like worried about it.
So when you have the Whipple, let's go to the Whipple. So how long was your post recovery? Like,
Yeah.
so, because usually, I mean, regardless, a Whipple's a Whipple. And like you said, like 8 hours, which is a pretty long period of time. So how was recovery for you?
Yeah. So recovery was, so I was in the hospital for 11 days total, but not 11 days consecutively. So I was in the hospital, like my first little stint was for 7 days, so like a week, which is pretty normal. She told me it was going to be from like 4 to 7 days. Obviously, I was hoping for the 4 rather than the 7.
Yeah.
Um, but it ended up being the full 7 days. The first 4 days after surgery, I was no food or water,
Yeah.
um, which was the first 3 days. I wasn't hungry or thirsty anyways, so that was kind of easy. But the last day, getting up to where I was going to be allowed to start eating like saltines and drink water, that was pretty hard for me. I was going a little loony in City of Hope at that point, wanting to eat something. Um, but yeah, I mean, the first 7 days, obviously, it was obviously painful. But they did have me like obviously on like certain like pain medications and making sure that like I'm not like in excruciating pain. Like obviously the pain medication isn't gonna like completely put me like out and like not let me feel anything. Um, but it helped a lot. And during those like first 7 days, the really big thing was getting like the physical therapist in there and teaching me how to like get up from the bed a specific way to not like like inflame like any of like this like the incisions or anything like that, because like obviously like getting up from a bed, like as much as we don't really realize it, it's a lot of like abdomen and your abs. So like it was a lot of work of like learning like how to get up and just walk around without like hurting myself. And that was really different for me, and kind of like a weird thing for like, especially for like my dad to like watch me like do that in the room. Cause like it's kind of just like, I feel like when you, although I'm like very still young, I've been at college for 3 years to 4 years now. Like I'm kind of like, I feel like somewhat independent. Like I don't need him to like help me walk around. But then like here we are in this situation where I'm like having to like relearn how to like get the stamina of walking around like the floor of like that I was on in City of Hope, and like just like having him having to watch me was very much like I didn't I didn't want to like put that burden on myself, but it did almost feel like that, kind of like just like wow, this sucks, like of like him having to like watch me do that. And like my mom also, because she also like spent a few nights at the hospital while I was there too. So I feel like that was like the biggest thing for me too, was just like I've I've been this independent person, and now I'm all of a sudden like dependent on my parents again, like fully. And like even like those 7 days after, like also like with a lot of conversations with dietitians and like telling me like what is going to be the best for me for recovery, what to eat, what not to eat. Um, Even just like not being able to like independently bathe myself, and like my mom having to help me like in the bathtub, like I'm like fully like a kid again. Like that was like very like surreal moments and like vulnerable moments that like I was comfortable with my mom in those moments, but it's still like it's very weird when it's like actually happening um in the moment. But yeah, so those 7 days were definitely like the the most crucial days for me, learning just to like how to like live and like support myself through the rest of my recovery, which ended up being they always say you don't really feel normal until like after about 3 months, and I can attest to that. Everything's kind of off for like the first like 3 months, and then after that you kind of start feeling like normal again, and like, oh, I can go to the gym again, and I can do this again, and like building up like the things that you did before surgery. But those first 7 days were pretty crucial, working with the physical therapist and the dietitians about that. So yeah.
It's crazy how much you don't know, like when you have those incisions in your
Yeah.
core, where and I'm not like, the Whipple's no joke. I mean, like the Whipple's probably one of the most complex surgeries that they do, for well, in terms of the abdomen.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's brain surgeries that are super complex, but when you think about your core, yeah, it's insane. It's insane. And trying to not rework that, but relearn that without having that core to
Yeah.
support you from any of those functions. To your point, like even getting out of bed or getting off the toilet, or putting on pants and shoes and stuff. It's wild. Um, so that happens in the summer.
Yes.
Do you go back to school then in the fall? So
Yeah.
you had to deal with some, like, because like to your point, I know it's a long recovery because of the procedure. So were there any, and I guess the question is also like today, like was there any relearning, like diet? I mean, the Whipple again, and not to get into particulars, but
Yeah.
they do take out the head of the pancreas. They take out part of, your gallbladder, the spleen. Like it's this whole reworking. So
Yeah.
things kind of have to figure, the body has this amazing way of figuring itself out again. But were you dealing with complications again? Like now, and put this in perspective, you're going back for your senior year, football, being a college student, trying to be normal, but you just had this major procedure done over the summertime.
Yeah. So as far as that goes, so yeah, so they did take out fully my gallbladder, which was that's probably the biggest change, just because that has like a lot of like,
Yeah, your diet.
yeah. So like that was a really big thing, like following surgery immediately. Because just like the doctor did warn me too, though. Like he said, like, like after the surgery, it's gonna be like you're a kid again. Like, what can you eat? What can't you eat? What agrees with you? What doesn't agree with you? So it's kind of like a trial and error kind of process.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was the diet for me, like especially like coming back to school. So like by the time I came back in the fall, I was about, what is that? I was really only like the 2.5, 3 month mark where I started feeling
Yeah.
normal when I came back to school. Um, so I was still very, very I was still very skinny from from surgery and underweight wise. Because I went into surgery at about like 113, 14 pounds, and then when I was weighing myself when I was back home, I was about, I think I had gotten down to like 93.
Wow.
So I had lost a lot of weight, which also caused me not to have like a menstrual cycle for about like 6 months. So that was kind of weird too. So yeah, so I barely gotten it back like a couple months ago, like 3 months ago. It started like my body was adapting and getting back to normal again. But yeah, so I was really underweight coming back to school, and so the biggest thing was like me trying to figure out how to gain the weight back, but gain the weight back in a way that goes along with my diet, and like
Yeah.
figure that out because I couldn't eat certain things. I mean, I'm also very, like, obviously we talked about like my age definitely plays a factor into it though, because I've definitely noticed like I can eat things that I technically shouldn't be able to because I don't have a gallbladder, but my body's able to digest those types of things because of, I feel like, my age. So I'm quite lucky in that aspect. I feel like I haven't had to, like, obviously, like the amount that I'm eating and how often I'm eating it has changed drastically. But me having to cut out completely certain foods wasn't really an issue for me, which I'm really grateful for. I feel like obviously as I age and as my body gets older, that'll probably become more of a problem and I will eventually have to cut out those certain foods. Um, but as of right now, I'm kind of just enjoying the few times here and there that I'm able to really do that. I'm able to still digest it. And like enjoy like fries and like enjoy like just like the occasional like fried food that I wouldn't be able to normally digest. So like I'm still able to like enjoy like the little like things and treats here and there, which was really nice because I mean like obviously like I'm also thinking about like my health in general, but of course when you hear someone say they're taking out your gallbladder, your first thing is like, oh my gosh, so like I can never have like fries again, like, and then it's like, so like you just think about like the little things like that. So like I have been able to like have it here and there, which is really nice. Probably with age that will change, but being that I'm young, it's definitely been like a silver lining that I'm still able to enjoy those things sometimes.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's good to hear, right? Because you're 21 years old, you should be enjoying those things at 21 and not worrying about it, given what you've gone through. Couple questions here for you. And first of all, thank you for sharing that journey. It's inspiring. And I think something that's been a theme, um, and you mentioned it early, was mindset. And just to hear you talk the way you talk about how you dealt with certain things is just so powerful and a lesson for all of us, regardless of our age. I want to ask you this question. So you talk about, coming out of this, you lost 20 pounds. We talked about the previous, like the roller coaster, I think you used the analogy of, right? Like of getting hit, then going, getting the diagnosis and then through this. And then you talk at the post, having some of these complications, just dealing with like the surgery. just like with like, being able to get out of bed and then, losing 20 pounds, not being able to menstruate, which I'm sure was like this mental, like, I guess, roller coaster.
Yeah.
Were there strategies that you used during that time that you could share? Because I think that's like a critical piece in this, like how you got through that. Because I can't
Yeah.
imagine, being 20 years old, at 21 at the time, 2021, again, most kids are thinking like, all right, what am I doing? Like, where am I going on spring
Yeah.
break? Like, what party? Like, what am I going to accomplish? Like, how many party? Like so more social stuff
Yeah.
and also academics, but like here you are, like you're like a shell of what you were, and you
Yeah.
have all these like other things, these ancillary things happening. Were there strategies that you use or things that you did during that time to kind of keep you focused and keep your head above water, I guess I would say.
Yeah. So I think I can attribute that again to like my family and friends. I have a really good like support system. So like even after surgery, like of course, like those first days, obviously I'm at City of Hope recovering. And then those first like 2 weeks, I'm just in bed. But like after those 2 weeks, like I just really made it a priority. And I think my friends did as well to like do the same things, which I think helped me keep my head above water of like doing the same things just with modifications. So like even though I still had like two drains in, like I'm like getting myself a drain bag and I'm like still going to the beach with my friends and they're taking me and like instead of like me sitting in the like going into the ocean, they're going while I'm sitting underneath an umbrella. But like we're still together and we're still hanging out and I'm still at like a place that I really love. Or like I remember when 4th of July came around, like I was like, I'm still gonna like even if I have to like sit down the entire time, I'm still gonna go out and be surrounded by my friends. So like I feel like that was like the biggest thing of like finding the way to still do the things that I love and be around the people that I love, just like and like also like the people around you being aware of those modifications that you need and respecting those. Like, I feel like that was like another big thing of like my friends always made sure like oh, let's make sure she's not in the sun. Let's get her an umbrella. Or like, let's like always check on Toni. Like, is she like, are you doing fine? Do you need this? Like, they're very like, just like accommodating to my situation. And I feel like just like, I didn't let my life stop, basically, is what I feel like kept my head above water. Is just like, I made sure that like the rest of my summer wasn't just me alone in my room. Like, and I mean, I know that that's a hard thing to say also though, because not everyone can do that or like not everyone can like still do those things with modifications. Like not everyone's available. That's not available to everyone. But I feel like for the people where they do have the opportunity to do that, I think that was like the biggest thing for me was like still finding a way to do the things that I love and like still and like once I was able to do more like getting in the gym for me personally was like a huge thing because I was used to like working out every single day before surgery and then you go to like not working out for 2 months and you're like oh my gosh like I can't do a push-up like I can't like I can only be on the stairmaster for like 5 minutes without getting tired like so it's like um getting in the gym and like seeing the progress of like me being able to like get my stamina back also kept me motivated to keep going and like just doing little things that made me feel better but like I think again like just like being around my friends and my family and like having those little modifications to the things I still loved helped me a lot.
I think that's so awesome and so powerful because you just said something that's like really wild in a very, very good way. Modifications. And I think everybody thinks like, oh, like if you're a runner and you have something like this or some sort of like, setback, like you got to be the runner again. But the modification might be just getting up and going to the mailbox every day,
Yeah.
right? So to your point, like you love going into the water, like, hey, you're at the beach. Doesn't, the modification is like, I can't go in the water right now, but I'm at the
Yeah.
beach still doing what I love to do. And so, man, that is so freaking powerful, Toni, and especially for someone your age to understand that is just it is pretty impressive. I've got two questions left for you here, and these are loaded. There's no right or wrong. It's given what you've gone through, your experience. What would be your advice to someone who, is just been diagnosed? Like, what would be like things that you would say, like, hey, you should do this given your experience?
Yeah. So I feel like with anyone who's getting diagnosed with this, I would say that I would allow myself, only because I know I didn't allow myself in the very beginning to do this, but I think it would have been helpful. Um, was like the obviously, like when you first get the diagnosis, I would allow yourself to feel emotionally. I wouldn't let those feelings build up, because I know I did somewhat let those build up a little bit when I first got my diagnosis, and I feel like it would have been really beneficial to me to just let myself feel for a second. So I feel like letting yourself feel emotionally in the beginning, and then after you let yourself feel for a second or a day, I would honestly just focus on like not not looking at it in a way of like, if I don't have these future days, but almost looking at it like that kind of too, of like just like living everything that like the time when you get your diagnosis, of just like doing the things that you love, like not letting the diagnosis stop you and completely consume your mind, which is a really hard thing to do. um but like, and also not ignoring it, like being aware of it, but in a way that still allows you to live your life. So I feel like I would let myself feel emotionally, and then also, like, while being aware of it, just continue to do the things that I love. And like we said, like when the time comes that there needs to be modifications made, make those modifications, but don't let it ever like take the thing that you love out of your life. That's what I would say. Just like bringing back to the word of like modification.
So awesome. Um, I have another question that just came up. So I know you mentioned something, faith being really important, going through this, and we mentioned you were in People magazine, and I know we were talking off the before recording, just like how things have gotten really like you're out there, like a lot of people are reaching out. How has that impacted you? Because I'm sure that's not easy. I mean, you're in your senior year. I know we were talking before we hit record, like your aspirations to go to law school, and like you're in this like college mode of enjoying what every 21-year-old should enjoy, like in their senior year. But now People gets the story. Now you're on the front page of People magazine, or, on the website, and, life is probably a lot different right now. Like, how are you able to manage all that? And how do you look at that? Because that could be a heavy burden, I guess, is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, so I think it's been kind of weird, but also like such a blessing at the same time. A blessing in the sense that I'm able to like bring the just like pancreatic cancer to the forefront, because I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. So like the fact that I'm able to have an article in People magazine, and for so many people to see it, and so many like for eyes to be on the issue in general, I felt like that was just like a blessing. But like as far as like people reaching out and people coming to talk to me about it, like I've felt very much like it's just given me like gratitude, because like I love it when people reach out too. I've had like very much like I've gone back and forth with people on Instagram, just like them talking to me about what current situation they're in and how they're doing, and them asking me for advice on like how you asked me the question, like what do I do, like
Yeah.
what helped you get through it, like how can you, like what advice can you give me, and I've given that advice to multiple people now who've reached out on Instagram, which is like has been like the most amazing thing. Um, but I feel like I also like it's such a big thing, but I feel like I also just like let it be like an addition. Like it's kind of just like complementary to my life. Like it's been an addition that hasn't though like I feel like I don't think about it all the time. Like it's such a weird thing because it's such a big thing. But like you said, like I'm a student. Like I'm like every day, like I'm going to classes. Like before I joined this podcast, I'm in an empty classroom right now because I just had a class next door.
Yeah.
Like I came straight from class. So like I'm I'm firstly a a senior who's about to graduate, and then I have this story. So I feel like it's like I'm living a very interesting life that kind of just like this story has like brought so many things, like so many great additions into my life, but hasn't become like my life. Like I feel
Yeah.
like it hasn't taken over my identity, which is like the biggest thing that I feel like I'm proud of myself for not allowing it to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love talking to people who have gone through similar things. It's also hard sometimes when people reach out because some people are going through a lot more serious situations than I was. Like yes, my situation is very serious and very unique and rare. But you know, like there's people who are messaging me who are in the thick of it, like really like going through like a really hard time. So like um those certain conversations are harder to have than others, um, because you know like you want to give them the best advice that you can, but you don't know if you're really helping them. So I feel like those certain conversations have been hard to have when people reach out to you, and I feel like that's like the most like different thing about this whole like story coming out is that you have these people who are asking you for advice, but sometimes you can't you try to relate as much as you can to how serious their situation was, but if you didn't experience exactly what their experience, it's kind of hard to, and hard to know if you're giving them the best advice possible. But I kind of just look at it as like I'm giving them advice in general. Like I kind of just look at it as like um, it's either like it's not nothing. Like whatever I'm telling them, they're going to take something out of it. And if it's not everything that they need, then that's fine. At least if I can give them something that they can take away, or at least one thing that's helping them, then I feel good about it. So, I mean, that's been like the biggest thing though, is just like having conversations with other people and supporting other people who are going through it. Um, and just being like a voice for them, even though also like the people that I'm talking to, people who are asking for advice from me are like years older than me and like have like years beyond their knowledge, like of like more life experience than I do, but I'm still able to like help them in a certain way. So that's like really surreal, but also just like, I don't know, it makes me feel proud.
Well, yeah, you should be really proud, and I'm sure your mom and dad are very proud how you've handled, this situation. And, I know we talked a little bit before we hit record, about your background. And, I had a very similar background. I was parochial schooled my whole life. Didn't go to parochial college, but all the way through, K through 12, pre-K through 12. So my faith has always been a big part of who I am.
Yeah.
And there's a couple ways that you can look at this. And when you get this diagnosis, and for me, as I mentioned before we hit record about my story, I wanted to help my dad, but now this has evolved into something
Yeah.
10, 20 times bigger, right? And your story is very similar, right? Like your faith and your background, and having that faith. I truly believe, you know, I've interviewed a lot of survivors. I don't have a count. It's well over 150, maybe 200. And the ones that thrive, there's a lot of common tenets, and one of them's faith. Now, it doesn't have to be Catholicism. It could be Judaism. It could be Buddhism, Islam. It could be whatever. But there's such a strong rooted faith. And sometimes, I look back at my faith. We don't know why we go through things, right, through life, but those things happen to us, good,
Yeah.
bad, or different. And how we react to those things kind of determines like that path, right? And so you get this diagnosis, and you could, like to your point, like you could have just stayed in your room, feel sorry for yourself, but you decided to not do that and thrive and now help other people, which is just so, so, so powerful, Toni. And like the world, like we could probably like I'm kind of like a glass half full guy versus half empty. And you could turn on the news, or you could read the newspaper, and you could like believe that things are like really bad and human beings are really bad people. I tend to look at the good and all that, and like there's still like a really there's probably billions of people that want to do good, that outweigh the negatives, and stories like yours. That's why we do this podcast, as I said, to like share these stories. So it's just so powerful, and it's just so awesome to be able to be in this spot to share your story, because I think what you've done in a very short period of time at a very young age, regardless if you're talking to someone who's a lot older, is inspiring and it is powerful. And those lessons, whether you're 19, 20, or 40, 50, 60, 70, are identical. Like how you deal with this, and how your mindset is and how you act, it is super powerful. So don't ever forget that. My last question here. This is the loaded of loaded questions. There's no right or wrong. How do you, Toni Bravo, define pancreatic cancer? What's your definition of it, given your experience?
Wow, is a loaded question. What is my definition of it, given my experience? I feel like, well, like because of my personal experience, I feel like my definition of it would be, I don't know, oh, that's a really hard question. Now that I'm really thinking about it, like, I actually thought about like what I define it as. I feel like I would define it as a the way I looked at it was a tameable monster, which is like so weird to like say it that way. But like it's almost like because I feel like in my situation, like I just felt like pancreatic cancer in itself is like a monster, like in like the effects that it has on families and people and everyone that gets diagnosed and everyone that's included within that circle. Um, but in my case, I just saw it as something that it's a monster that can be tamed. And I knew that like with my determination and like with the doctor's help at City of Hope and everything that like whether or not I overcame it completely, which I did according to my surgery, because of my surgery, which I'm forever grateful for, that it was something that could be controlled and that I would still have control of my own life. And that I wasn't going to let it control me. So in that way, it was tameable. Whether or not it is overcomable for certain people, it's tameable in the sense that you can still have control of how you experience your life and what you do and how you decide to let it affect you. So like I feel like that's like the first thing that came to mind. I don't know I know you said there's no right or wrong answers. It's a really hard question. But that's how I would have defined it. Like if now thinking about it, which I've never thought about it. So that's actually a really good question. But yeah.
You knocked it out of the park, Toni. Thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity here to share your journey. If someone's out there, maybe they're going through their own personal journey with pancreatic cancer. I know you mentioned Instagram a little bit. Where's the best place for people to follow you, connect with you? Is that Instagram or maybe another place?
Yeah, so Instagram is definitely the best way to DM me. I always look at my requests. I never leave them like um unlooked. So
Mm.
my Instagram is Toni__Bravo. So two underscores, but then just my name, Toni Bravo with an I, Toni with an I. So you could definitely reach me there the easiest way. And I always look at it. I'm as a 21-year-old, I'm very active on social media. So it's never not looked at. So yeah, so anyone listening, like if you completely want to ask anything, any questions, or just have a conversation, like just anything, my DMs are always open, my messages are always open, and I'm open to talk about anything. Yeah.
Awesome. Toni, thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity here at Project Purple to share your journey on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to like it down in the description and make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. That's a wrap of another episode of the Project Purple podcast. Till next time, please be safe and thanks for listening.